It is loading.
Just turned my phone on Do Not Disturb.
Yes, please put my email goes off all the time. So go ahead
Oh,
and put your computers and everything on.
that's a good. Thank you for doing that. You know, I don't even know how to do that.
I still don't know how to do that either sometimes.
I'm just gonna exit out the email that goes rogue. There, I did that.
So hello everybody in
Like I
Facebook.
haven't had a Mac that long, and I can't remember how to silence it all. But
If you go
hopefully
to the top, it should be some like toggle things. And
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, Siri's talking to me. What do I do,
We'll
Jasmine?
catch it as we go because we got some people logging in.
Oh,
So
okay.
hello everybody that's watching. If you're watching, go ahead and tell us hello in the comments below. We want to see you. We want to talk to you. Well, Starting Point is back. I'm so excited about it. It's season 2. So go ahead and say hello to us in the comments. I want to shout you out, let you know that we see you, that you're joining us. Today, I have 2 amazing therapists that are going to be on. As you're watching this, if you have any questions, please go ahead and post those questions in the comments because I want to get those questions answered. If you don't know, Starting Point is a virtual living room where I like to talk about facing fear. Sometimes we talk about food. A lot of times we fall into talking about faith. And in this season specifically, we're going to focus on all of those things as it pertains to friendship. And friendship in all different walks. So friendship with parents, friendships with relationships, opposite sex friendships, same sex friendships, friendships in church. By the time we get done with this, y'all gonna be tired of me talking about friendship. But we're gonna talk about it as much as we can. And in this video in particular, we're gonna be talking about the loss of friendship. And we're gonna be walking through what it looks like for you to find a therapist as you're walking through that. How do you heal as you're going through that? So you're gonna wanna tune in. And for our icebreaker today, you see I have 2 guests on. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. I want you guys to tell me, what is your go-to meal when you're feeling sad? And I'll go first. So they're going to be thinking, you guys that are watching, you tell us in the comments below. My go-to meal when I'm feeling sad is, it's going to be catfish, y'all. It's just fried. It's crunchy.
That's good.
It's salty. It's all of the things that I need it to be. It's probably crawfish or ice cream. So
what kind of ice cream?
I like mint chocolate chip ice cream. I know that's not a fan favorite, but I do.
I like it.
I also
like it.
Blackberry ice cream.
I've never had blackberry ice cream.
It's good.
So that is actually my go-to thing is ice cream. I know you said a meal, but mine is ice cream. Oh, sorry. I'm Michelle McLaughlin, by the way. I am currently in full-time private practice at LCS Counseling and Consulting in Fort Worth. You can look us up at www.lcsac.com if you want more information or you would like to get into a therapy session with any of our awesome, wonderful therapist. We have quite a few. So if you're like, she gets on my nerves, you can select so many other people, but definitely look us up. So my go-to meal when I am sad, stressed, overwhelmed, anything is chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream from Brahms. I get a double dip on a cone and it just gives me all the life that I need in that moment.
It is a choice.
That chocolate chip cookie dough brought me through the pandemic. Even though we're still in it, it definitely brought me through those first several months. And it brought me through with a couple extra pounds, but it got me through.
That's okay. That's okay.
So, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, no, please go if you need.
That's it for me. Yeah.
That ice cream. Hi, I'm Rachel Olshine. I am Director of Career Services at LeTourneau University. I also am a licensed professional counselor. I see mostly teenagers and young adults. I keep a pretty small private practice out of the university center just because I have a full-time gig. But counseling is something that I love and feel honored to get to walk with people through their journey. You can check me out at rachelolshine.com. And I just felt like a salesperson right there with my
it's good.
Right?
Good. You guys should sell yourself. Why? Because they're fantastic. Because I went ahead and it was fantastic.
And then Rachel Olshine LPC on Facebook. And let's see. So I'm really like a sushi connoisseur.
Yes.
Like I
Mhm.
I love sushi. Like I love the raw, the fried, the whole spectrum of sushi. Like so like if I'm and my husband doesn't eat it. So it's basically like is my meal, right? Like
That
he
means you don't have to share.
exactly. That is exactly right. He may sometimes venture out with the like the tempured or fried whatnot, but so I don't have to share, which is nice. So I like shout out to Sumo here in town. They have a phenomenal Texas roll that's delicious, a Kilgore roll that's delicious, and then you can never go wrong with just a good basic spicy tuna, spicy
Yeah.
salmon. So I'd put myself in the sushi realm for my
It feels
comfort food.
healthy, right? Even, I mean, maybe
Sure.
it's
Is
fried.
it
It
not?
got mayonnaise and stuff on it, but it's healthy-ish, right?
It has
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
vegetables. It has
It's vegetable
vegetables.
somewhere in there. It's a
Yeah.
Yes.
cucumber.
There's a
Mhm.
cucumber, right?
It's fine.
For sure.
So we have a lot of people that are tuning in. Y'all are talking about ice cream, strawberries, and Nutella. Coffee and tea are your go-to. All of
Mhm.
those are excellent choices. Y'all know that we already said that we love ice cream on here. So thank
Mhm.
you all for tuning in. I want to share with you a little bit about what we're going to be talking about and why we're talking about it before we get started. I'm not going to talk for long because these ladies got a lot of wisdom to share. So I want them to be able to share. We're talking about the journey to therapy because if you're following this page, then you know that I started therapy about 8 months ago. And my journey to that has been a bumpy one. It has. It started when I lost my dad almost 3 years ago now. And losing him was losing my best friend. We're talking about friendships. It was the person that understood me, the person that I could lean on. And to have a dad that was like that, I'm truly grateful because I know that there are quite a few people that didn't grow up with their dad around. And so I'm grateful that I had the example of my father that I had. But learning to live life without his voice was very difficult. It almost made me feel like I was losing my mind a lot of the time. And I would ask people, I would be like, I remember asking my pastor one day and I said, I don't want to ask this question in a way that offends you, but I really want to understand because I don't understand. I said, because he grew up without his dad. I said, Pastor, how did you move through life without that kind of voice? Like, how do I live in this moment as a person that's father isn't present? And he was like, you just gotta you just have to start making some choices and not leaning on that voice all the time because that's what he had to do. And so I really felt like I was losing my mind, y'all. Like there is no other way to explain it. That's what it felt like. And so I was like, it got to the point where my cousin was going to therapy and she was like, this has been really beneficial for me. I was in school for it, but I was still kind of like, but I don't need a therapist because I'm strong, being stupid. And my mom and my sister, I just knew that it was such a weight on all of us that I couldn't go to them to talk to them about this because it would just be too much weight on them too. And so grieving just got to the point where I was like, I need to do something or I will not be okay. And so I went to my first therapist and me and her, we didn't gel well. So I went to like one session and I was like, well, girl, I don't like this. So I'm gonna see you later. And I took about 3 months after that and I didn't go back to therapy. And then finally I found a man that's at Pathstones in Longview and I met with him and it was like I was like, God knows what he's doing. It was like I was literally sitting across from somebody that wasn't my dad, but had my dad's spirit. That he was just like, I want to walk with you through this. I want to talk with you through this. I want to walk with you in healing. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all, we just got to start talking about my grief with my dad last week.
Yeah.
Up until then, it was just like, so what's going on? Like, fill me in on this. And I thought I was fine. And I'm like, I'm doing great. And then last week I was crying my little eyes out. And I was like, sir, I don't want to do this with you today.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, no, that's what we're here for. I've been waiting to get to this moment with you. And so I just want to encourage people that are on their way to therapy that it may be a bumpy ride. I know that 2020 was ridiculous. The 2021 has not been super great either yet. I believe that it's going to turn around. But grief has been a big part of that. And maybe you are grieving the loss of a loved one, but maybe you aren't. Maybe you're grieving the loss of some opportunities that you had. Maybe you're grieving the loss of some friendships that you had. Maybe you're grieving the loss of that person-to-person interaction because you've been by yourself for so long. Maybe you're grieving the loss of a job. Whatever that thing is, that grief is real and it's personal to you. And so we want to talk through what that looks like today and how you can just help yourself in healing through that, because your own health is your responsibility. Nobody's going to do that for you. You have to take the initiative and do that for yourself. And you're valuable enough and worth it enough to do that work. And it's going to be hard work, but we want to introduce you to what that work may look like tonight. And so you guys, if you would share with me what in your definition, like from school and your experience, what does it mean to grieve?
Okay. Rachel, do you want to go ahead or?
Sure, yeah. When I think of grief, I mean, I think of emptiness. I think of
a loved one, but maybe. Oh, sorry.
We good?
We good now.
I think of, most people probably think of a physical loss, but I love that you just said, Jasmine, that people are grieving so many other things these days. And for me, I think there was a loss of normalcy, a loss of safety with everything, living in a pandemic of fear, right? That comes with, our lives have completely changed and we don't know what is gonna happen, right? Like, and so when I think of kind of grief and grieving, what it means to really grieve is just that suffering of not feeling the things that you maybe normally have felt. A lot of people will talk about, they just feel lost, right? They just feel detached and they just don't know where to go. And I think that's what happens when we lose something valuable to us. And it doesn't just have to be a person. It can be an emotional state. It can be, like I said, a sense of safety or normalcy. You know, and grief doesn't just start and stop, right? It's not linear. And so I think it's gonna look pretty different for each individual.
Right. Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly with Rachel's response and definition. I think it's like the physiological and psychological process of like bereavement, the loss of something valuable that's no longer there, that held like a significant place in a person's life. And like Rachel said, the definition of grieving to me varies from person to person. Each person grieves differently. What they grieve is different. How they grieve is different. So when I'm talking to clients, a lot of times I don't want to give like a black and white definition, because grief is not black and white. And like Rachel said, sometimes you could be okay. And then sometimes it feels so heavy and so gut wrenching that you don't think you're going to make it to the next moment, much less the next day. So I really try to keep it to what that person thinks it is. Like, this is grief. Let's talk about that. We talk about maladaptive coping skills and grief and maladaptive behaviors and grief. But there is no like correct way to grieve. So a lot of times people feel like they're grieving wrong. Like, oh, I didn't cry when I lost this person or when I lost that position. Okay, that does not mean you weren't affected by that. You weren't sad by that. That didn't disrupt your life in any type of way. So it just varies from person to person.
Yeah. I think that's good. I think that you're right. I think that a lot of people can feel like, well, it didn't look like they looked. Like I didn't cry. Like I don't feel as sad as I think I should feel. Or how should I go back to work? When do I go back to work? I don't really know. Like, do I talk about them? Do I not talk about them? Do I talk about the loss of this experience? Do I not? I think that that's so intensely personal that I think that's important to reiterate, is that whatever you're experiencing, even if it don't look like what nobody else is experiencing, that's okay. Nobody can tell you how to walk through this.
Grief isn't just for a person. It can be so many different things. I think a lot of times we try to limit ourselves to like this significant thing in our life, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. Like you could, especially in this pandemic season, the loss of status that people had to experience relatively quickly. Like that was they had to grieve that. And for some people, they felt silly having to grieve that, but you went like relatively overnight living one type of life and then all of a sudden not having that.
Yeah.
And so you can grieve that in so many different ways. So it doesn't have to be something that is normal, so to speak, to grieve. Whatever type of loss that you have experienced, you can grieve that.
Yeah.
I don't
Somebody,
know about y'all. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
okay.
Like around this time last year, either kind of end of March, moving into April, there were days where I was just sad,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Like,
for sure.
and I wasn't exactly sure why, and I couldn't really place it. And it was like, it just felt, I don't want to say hopeless, but there were moments of like, this isn't right, and I don't know what to do, and I feel like we're going to be in quarantine forever, and
Yeah.
yet we know that that's not the case, obviously.
Right.
But like, there were days that were just so heavy,
Mhm.
and nothing had happened.
No.
Right? Like, we were still enjoying Tiger King and all the good things that, you know, quarantine brought.
Yes.
But like, there were days I just cried,
Mhm.
and my spouse was like, "What's the matter?" And I'm like, "I'm just sad." Like,
Yeah.
and that's just a part of that grieving, right? Like,
And sitting
well,
in that space.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
Somebody in
good.
the comments put that even being a mom, that sometimes you can grieve your old
Listen.
person, the grieve
Listen.
old body. Somebody
I'm
else
gonna
said,
snap for that right there because that just resonated with me. That is so true. Especially your old person, your old life, your old body. Because what you get back after the baby is born, I'm like, wait, that's not me. That's not my body. But that's true. Good. Thank
yeah.
you. Mm-hmm.
Somebody else was saying that grieving missed opportunities and the loss of
Yes.
normal. That's so good. I think that we're all understanding like what grieving is. And that it's
Absolutely.
essential
For
to
sure.
grieve. So
Yeah.
I know that we were supposed to talk about some of the stages of grief, and I think that we understand that while there is a scientific like explanation, and there are like models that you can use to understand grief. It's so individual that I don't even think it would benefit anybody to walk through those models with you. Not that they're not relevant, just that I don't want
It
you
can
to
be used as a foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a foundation of, okay, you incorporate these models, but not everybody goes in order of like the Kubler-Ross and goes through all the denial and anger,
Right.
those types of things. Like, but when we limit it to just that, that's when we feel like we're grieving wrong or incorrectly or having those and you don't want to be having like internal conflicts and grief. That's a lot going on inside your person.
Yeah.
So true. I think that my next question for you guys is then how can you support somebody who is going through grief?
That's a good question. One of the biggest things that I've had to learn working with grief and experiencing grief is kind of what not to say. I know a lot of times, especially here in the Bible Belt, people always say, well, it was their time. God called them home. That person is no longer suffering. And although I do think that is well intent, like the person is meaning like they want to comfort you and be there for that person. That is probably one of the harder things to hear. Like, okay, God may have called him home, but I didn't want him. I didn't want him to answer. Like, I didn't want him to go home at that point. And it's not always comforting to a person to hear that. So a way to support a person is to just be there, to sit in that space with them, to give them a hug, allow them to cry, to help them with tasks that they have going on, like provide meals, run errands, watch their children if they have children, watch their pet if they have a pet, take care of course, I know funeral arrangements and those things are they're deeply personal, but there are other tasks that they've now had to put on hold in order to kind of switch gears and jump in to take care of whatever they need to take care of. Just be there. Avoid like should statements. You ought to stay away from time frames to give people like, well, that happened. You should be over that. Well, why should they be over that?
Right.
Just be there as a support. And one of the biggest things is be there after the funeral, after everyone has left that person, after all of the noise has stopped and they're just in that quiet space and they really, really feel the loss of that, whatever that they're grieving. Be there after, just be there with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even I'm thinking through, again, it goes, what grief, the biggest experience of grief I know is with my dad, right? And so I'm thinking through when I lost him and whenever people started showing up, and I remember it feeling like a dream, like, why are they here? I don't want to talk to people right now. Like, I cannot tell you if I even remember people showing up. Like, who came? I don't know at that point. Because I was just funerals are weird in that I can look back and laugh now, but people say the weirdest stuff during that time that you just be like, I don't know if you hurt yourself because you didn't know what to say to help me, but also never say that again.
For sure.
I think when people feel real uncomfortable, it's almost like that word vomit, right? And like you said, there's often good intention, right? But I think there's nothing wrong with just being present, right? And so a little like small backstory. So like my dad was raised Jewish and became a Christian when he was like 19 or 20. And so growing up, we did a lot of kind of integration of Jewish customs and holidays and things like that. And so the one thing that I very much appreciate is a concept of sitting Shiva. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with that. In the Jewish culture, sitting Shiva is like a time, it's like a 7-day period that family members and community members really rally around the person who has lost that person. And it's not a time to sit and like just chit chat and gab, but a lot of times people are just silent and they're just there to be present. People will talk about, the deceased and talk about, memories and things they learned from that person and provide support that way. But it's really kind of like in Job, right? When his friends just kind of sat with him. And I think there's a lot to be said about just being present, not scrolling on your phone, just sitting together, right? But just being there for that person. And, when Shiva is occurring, it often happens at that person's home, but family members and other community members and friends will come in and like cook and clean and take care of those physical, kind of what you were saying of like, run errands for them, go get groceries, like do the things that are probably very much needed, but also maybe not minuscule, but like, sometimes people wouldn't think that's, that's important. Right. So I think you hit kind of everything on the head with that. And that was my only little 2 cents of just what I've seen and experienced, like when relatives on my dad's side have passed away.
And I think it's important for people to also recognize their own discomfort and being a support for that person and knowing that it's not always going to be comfortable and that's okay. And if you don't know what to say, acknowledge that. Don't try to like small talk or minimize their experience or their feelings. Just go to that person and say, I'm really sorry. I don't know what to say to you right now, but I want to help you. I'm just going to sit here. And like you said, you're sitting Shiva like that. You're just sitting in that space with that person and you're allowing them to be vulnerable. And if you're genuinely allowing that person to be themselves and to just grieve, that's support. They'll appreciate that.
Yeah. And what do you think about like when people say, let me know if you need anything?
Oh my gosh. Because I've said that. I'm like, and I don't know.
Too. I have too, for sure. And I think I catch myself or I've caught myself like, I know what I mean by that, but as someone who's grieving, are they in a position to really reach out?
Right.
Emotionally, mentally, etc.
Yes.
And so sometimes we know what we mean, but we got to put maybe more feet to what we're talking about.
So good.
And like really check in and be intentional about that. That's so good. I think about most recently, like the winter storm and how so many people were impacted by that. And of course, when we think about like our natural response, thinking about grief is like the loss of a loved one. But a lot of people like lost their houses and they lost like material possessions and even valuable things. They lost those things. And when you said that, like I've told someone like, let me know how I can help or just reach out if you need help. But I have tried to be purposeful and intentional to check in. Hey, how are you doing? Thinking about you, praying for you, those types of things, because they may not know what they need. I don't know what they need. Obviously, I can't go buy a whole house. I wish I could. But even, and it's so hard in this pandemic season because of course we're supposed to be social distancing or whatever. So it's hard to invite someone over for a meal. And it's hard to say, hey, come over here, let the kids play together. But yeah, I like that. Definitely being intentional about your words and putting feet to ground.
Because that's even what I was thinking about. I was like, well, how do you do that during COVID? And that's like, there's DoorDash, there's Waiter. They're saying there's not waiting until people are like, well, I need somebody to get groceries. There is, I got groceries, and they're getting delivered to your house at this point.
There's GoFundMe.
Yeah. There are a lot of options, and it's more distant, and that is harder. And I think that does play into like our experience with grief during this pandemic, but just taking advantage of the technology that we do have. Like,
for sure.
We could dwell in the down, but let's see, what do we have? What are our options? And so we talked about the personal experience of grief and how to support somebody through grief. And I'm sure we could go on and on about what that looks like. But I want people that are watching, like, how do they know, what are some signs that they should go seek a therapist or get some professional help? Like, at what point in your grief is it, I know that it's very individual to you, but at what point is it, okay, I need some help? And maybe that's not just through grief. What point in like your depression or in your sadness or in your pain or in your anxiety should you say, you know what, I need somebody to help me?
And I'm going to just hop on that for a second, because there's a part of me that's like, don't wait for signs. Like, be proactive. Like, don't wait till you can't go to work every day and you can't get out of bed and you're not showering and you've lost 30 pounds. Like, don't wait. Like, if you have an inkling that, hey, maybe I should talk to someone, even if, you got to factor in, and we know people don't go to counseling for tons of reasons, right? And we could sit here and probably talk about that for a long time too, but like, Jasmine, you already kind of hit on it, and I went to counseling during the pandemic as well, because we need not even a sense of community, but someone to see us, right? Someone to hear us, someone to validate the shit that we're going through, right? Like, I know this is a Christian. Christian. I love Jesus. That's a little. Okay.
Amen.
But I mean, yes, there are some serious signs that you should take into account, but I would also encourage people, if you're struggling, reach out, look up therapists around you, try to find someone you feel like you can connect with. Don't wait till it's so bad, right? Now, and feel free to jump in at any point, but I mean, if you are having thoughts of hurting yourself, killing yourself, you're struggling with, maybe you're seeing other things, people can't see or hear, or you're really struggling with going to work, maintaining your job, your kind of daily functioning is impaired. Those are some signs that it would probably be helpful.
Did you lose her?
I think I did.
Okay. She will be back, but I can pick up where she was going off. I definitely, or where she was going. I know if you're withdrawn, isolated, depressed mood, if you're engaging in maladaptive coping skills like drinking, using drugs, having sex unprotected, or just swiping left. I don't know if they swipe left or right, but you are just engaging in all kind of maladaptive, reckless types of behaviors. It's time for you to reach out. Like she said, if you're hallucinating, homicidal, suicidal ideation, if you are reliving, like if you have experienced some type of traumatic death and you're reliving that over and over, and it's like a record playing in your head, it's time to reach out. I think sometimes, like people say, pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, put on your big girl panties, and appear to be happy. If you are so just okay throughout the day and you have put that mask on and you're falling apart when you're by yourself and you cannot pull it together and you're internally hurting, seek help, find you a therapist. I do really feel like we have to take away the stigma of therapy. Like, it's just not for crazy people. You don't just need it when you're just down and you've fallen on bad times. We all need emotional check-ins. Like, I know you both have engaged in therapy. I engaged in therapy throughout the pandemic, for the pandemic, of course, but then all of the racial things that were going on, and having to like deal with that and help my clients process that and deal with that. I mean, it was a lot to kind of take on, and I wasn't withdrawn or isolated or depressed or any of those things, but I felt the heaviness of that.
Yeah.
So I needed to talk to somebody else to help me with that, because that was heavy. That was debilitating in a sense, because I was great throughout the day, but then at night I would be exhausted. I would be tired.
Yeah. I think that being a woman, it's easy to take on the weight of other people, especially because we're three women on this call, and I know that men have their own experience with therapy too. But I can relate to being a woman, specifically being a Black woman, feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. Like,
Absolutely.
okay, I have to carry this. I have to be okay, because if I'm not okay, then everybody else is not going to be okay.
For
And I
sure.
think that those are signs that you may be putting too much on yourself. Like that you may need to go talk to somebody that is objective, that's not your family, that won't say, well, it's just this, like, you'll be all right, that won't brush it off.
Yeah.
Somebody that will allow you to speak clearly and say your piece without invalidating everything you just said. Somebody asked in the comments, they said, what would you all say to someone who is discouraged and seeking counseling because they don't want to become dependent on it? They don't want to feel like they can't function without it.
I would definitely normalize their feelings. I think that's a great point. I tell my clients this all the time in our first sessions or somewhere within that, is that my whole purpose is to work myself out of a job. Like, this is probably one of the only professions where I am actively working from the moment you come in to meet me, is to work myself out of a job. And a therapist knows how to handle if they see you're becoming dependent on therapy, but don't let that stop you. You can work through that. Like, you are needing that person to speak with. Oh, sorry, my children are bursting through. So sorry. Rachel, you might have to take over.
Okay, I'll tap in. I say something pretty similar. I basically say, my goal is to help walk with you, but I don't force you to walk.
No,
right?
So good.
I can't make you walk. Like, the analogy or metaphor, I'm not good at remembering which is which, but like a little baby has to learn how to walk on their own, right? We can hold their hands, we can help guide them, we can give them some boundaries or support, but at the end of the day, that's something they got to do on their own. And so I say, unless there is a lot of stuff, I'm really working to equip you with the tools for you to live your best life.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
in a couple months to a year, you'll need therapy like every week, like we've been doing, right? Like, and so really trying to equip people with, skills and grounding techniques or whatever it may be, to help them be the best version of themselves.
And sometimes that may be their only outlet, their only source to be able to come in and be the best version of themselves, or to be vulnerable and have a safe space where they can unpack things. Don't let the fear of being dependent stop you from engaging in therapy, because one, you can process that in a safe space and really talk about and unpack what that means. But like Rachel said, we're here to help, to guide you and to take you from not walking or not doing anything to crawling to walking to letting go of the hand and walking independently with your whole toolbox of things to live your life.
Yeah. I also will add in, how the media and movies paint counseling is not necessarily real life. And so a lot of people have this idea of what counseling is, which is actually pretty inaccurate.
So inaccurate.
And so we're not going to sit here and just tell you what to do.
No.
Right. Like, and I think this is where the empowerment comes from the counseling relationship of like, we may provide suggestions or options, but at the end of the day, we spend 50 minutes together and then you
Absolutely.
have the rest of the week to go forth and conquer. And so
Mhm.
really it's you doing the work,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
We're not working harder. What they teach us in grad school, don't work harder than your client,
Absolutely.
right?
Uh-huh.
And so at the end of the day, it's kind of it's not a funny statement, but it's accurate, because then at the end of the time that we're reaching termination and the client has grown and evolved and really has done so much incredible work,
Absolutely.
it's all their work,
It
right?
is all their
We
work.
didn't do it. They did the work, right?
And they are the experts on their lives, not us. We're just
For
here
sure.
to help them really sort through the weeds, so to speak, and start to make sense of different things going on in their life. But like Rachel said, we are there 50 minutes, maybe once or twice a week, but you have the whole entirety of the week to live on your own, to make decisions on your own. We're just helping you along the way.
That's so good. I think that was helpful. I know that they're in the comments talking back to me. They're talking back to y'all. So I know.
Hey.
As people are looking for a therapist, we're talking about some of the things people can gain from therapy and how to just face it head on and not allow the things that may scare us about it to keep us from it. Let's equip people with how to find a therapist, right? So what should somebody be considering as they are looking to find a therapist?
I think one of the first things is to recognize what's important to you. Obviously, you cannot, if you're not comfortable with certain things, embrace that. Be okay with that. Like if you want a therapist of a certain gender, of a certain age, of a certain racial background, of a certain religion, that's okay, because that all is a part of building the relationship, building rapport with that therapist. So really have a deep kind of thought process of what do I want? What helps me feel comfortable in connecting with people? If you want to seek a Christian counselor, then obviously that will go to the top of your list when you're trying to find a therapist. If you are more comfortable with women versus men, then that should go at the top of the list, or vice versa. If you want a therapist that looks like you, then obviously that is very important. And that's who you would seek out when you're trying to find a therapist. Of course, there's cost. Look at credentials of the therapist, their
'Cause you know
theoretical
there are
approaches,
people out there who are faking it.
faking it.
Faking it.
And they give us a bad rap, but really
Sure
look
do.
at the credentials of the therapist, their theoretical approaches, to see if that aligns with your own beliefs. The cost, that is definitely something important, because ideally you would engage in therapy weekly or biweekly, and at some point work your way on down to monthly check-ins, those types of things. But definitely really what is important to you that will help build that therapeutic relationship. Don't be embarrassed by that, and don't feel shame or guilt by wanting those specific things.
You summed that up wonderfully. The only thing I second everything you just said. There are also great tools online. Psychology Today is a wonderful resource. You type in your zip code, you
Yes,
can
for sure.
sort. I mean, everything she just said, right? Like you can sort by gender, you can sort by modalities or theoretical framework, multicultural counseling perspective. And then even like you mentioned, like, okay, you want a Christian counselor, but even figuring out, well, what does that exactly look like? Are we talking, are we going to pray at every session? Are we going,
Right.
obviously I believe, like, I am a Christian, but I don't necessarily advertise myself
Right.
as a Christian counselor.
Right.
But I tell everyone in my paperwork and my declaration of consent that I will never force my beliefs on you, right? Like that's unethical. You have your own spiritual journey, whatever that may look like. And this is a place that we can talk about that. I think it's important for you to do your homework and your research, and kind of like Jasmine's experience. First homegirl wasn't a good connection. And so
Good.
That's okay.
that's okay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think, if that's something that happens to you, I think it may be awkward, but I think it's okay to say, hey, I think I'm going to go in a different direction. I always tell my clients on their first intake that, hey, if at some point you realize, man, Rachel's weird, I don't want to talk with her no more, I will help you find the
For
best fit
sure. Yes.
for you,
Yes.
because that's important. And I want you to achieve the things that you want to achieve. And if it's not working with me, that's okay. I'm a big girl. Life
Yes.
moves on, and it's about you. It's not about me.
Absolutely.
Not about me.
Shop around. Do not give up. Like if you feel uncomfortable, of course, address that. Like sometimes it could be your own biases against therapy and not necessarily that therapist. Bring that up. Let's talk that out. Like as trained, skilled clinicians, like we can handle that. Do not go into therapy trying to be protective of course, don't be rude, but do not go into therapy to be protective of that therapist's feelings. Talk about that. A good fit is important for the long term of therapy. Like this is an intimate relationship. You're being vulnerable. You're coming into a space. I mean, it's a good fit. It's just as important as having a great bra. Like you want that support. You're not going to be out here just having just a unsupportive bra.
Yeah.
Have a supportive therapist that is a good fit.
And if you do have an unsupportive bra, let's talk about letting things go.
Let it go.
Let's have that discussion. Why do we still hold on to this? Okay.
This is not supporting you in the way it should.
Right, because I think that we would shop around in any other instance, but
Yes.
you have to fit. Like if we're thinking about a spouse or we're thinking about a friend, if you are not fulfilling the needs that I need, or if you're hurting me, or if you're betraying me, I'm going to say, you know what, you got to go. And so we have to keep that same thing into consideration, that you are the expert in yourself, that you will dictate who is in your life and who's not, that you have that kind of power, even in the relationship of therapy, that you're not going to go in and be like, let me share my whole life story with you today. Like, it's just like, you don't have to do that if you don't.
And if you are hanging on to those toxic relationships, please get into therapy, because let's talk about that. If you are hanging on to people that are hurting you, whether that's friendships, family members, a hurtful bra, we need to talk about these things.
Yes.
So we talked about a little bit about some barriers, and we've been talking about some barriers to therapy over and over again. So I think that I'm going to skip on down to the question of I know that we talked about cost some, and I know that cost can be a great barrier to people coming into therapy. So what can you do if you can't afford therapy?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, there's options, right? A lot of people aren't familiar. They just think, well, first, let me back up for a second. Some people may or may not have insurance, right? So we've talked a little bit about costs and barriers and whatnot, but sliding scale is something that a lot of therapists utilize, especially in a pandemic, right? Where people were losing their jobs and yet mental health access was so needed. So sliding scale will base your payment on your salary. There's also, especially like in Longview, there's a great organization called One Love Longview that has started free mental health counseling and substance abuse groups. And so even in little bitty Longview, there's free resources. So if you're in, the Dallas Metroplex, I'm sure there's some options there as well. We have different levels. Like I'm an LPC, which people are probably like, what all these letters stand for, right? But like a licensed professional counselor. So like I've done my training, I've done my clinical hours, and I am a full licensed counselor. Now below us, not below in like
before
literal,
becoming fully licensed.
Right. They are people as well, right? But we have LPC associates. So they are still gaining their hours, and they tend to be a little bit less in cost. And honestly, I always appreciate just a very honest conversation. Like, even if it's regarding, hey, could I pay you X amount of money on Monday and like you run the card on Friday when I get paid? And like, I'm more than happy to work with people on those kind of things. I know working at a counseling center, there's a little more maybe potential flexibility as opposed to like a full private practice, but it never hurts to ask.
I was going to say, like a lot of schools where like licensed clinical social workers or LPCs where we're training to get that experience, but we're under the supervision of someone who does already have that full licensure, who does have that experience. A lot of times they will have like community resources available where people who can come in and seek therapy. And sometimes, since a person is practicing, it's either free or it's extremely affordable because they're in training. They're under the guidance of a licensed professional. And so they're trying to get that experience. I would say if you have a more severe type of issue or concern, that may not be the right place. But if you go there, they can definitely point you into the right direction. Group is also an option. A lot of times that may not be as expensive as individual therapy, but there are like-minded people who are having similar issues or concerns under the facilitation of a licensed clinician that can help you start to process some of those issues and things that you have going on. So there are all types of resources available right now, especially when mental health is on the forefront and there are so many conversations going on. And if you don't know, ask your primary care physician. Sometimes if they don't know, they can point you into the direction of someone. There are social workers often in those types of settings that can point you into different resources where you can get into an affordable space and talk with a clinician.
For sure.
So good. If you have any other questions, we're getting into the last 15 minutes, so make sure that you're putting those in the comments. They are sharing with us a lot of wisdom today, and I'm so grateful for it. We have another question that was in the comments, which is, what encouragement would you give to someone who has had a bad experience with a therapist and are hesitant to seeking the help of someone else?
Definitely validate their experience. I oftentimes, although I may not have, I apologize because I know how hard it is to come into that space and to trust someone and to be vulnerable and to be disappointed or upset. And I like to explore, well, what was not helpful? What did you find helpful? What was problematic about that? And encourage them not to give up. We've said this several times, like good fit is really, really important. Go back, reevaluate what about that experience was not helpful to you. And then once you reach out again, talk that through with the therapist, like really be honest and say, I engaged in therapy before. This therapist was unsupportive in this way, or I had an issue, whatever that issue may be. I truly am sorry that was your experience, and I really hate that. But again, do not give up. If you need help and you need that type of support, try again. Like you would not, and I keep going back to bra, but you would not stop wearing a bra if you had a bad experience with it. Like, I feel like therapy is sometimes like breathing. Like, we wouldn't stop breathing if it hurt us to breathe. We still have to do it.
Yeah.
Keep trying to engage. Go
Good.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I interrupted you. When something's good, you're going to tell someone about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
right?
yeah, that's true.
And you
Mm-hmm.
also going to tell someone when it's bad, right? But I would also encourage that person, you've had a bad experience, and you may feel different types of emotions wanting to potentially go back. And there may be some hesitation in even asking, friends or someone you trust, like, hey, have you ever been to therapy? Do you have a counselor or like or would recommend? And I kind of do the same thing. I always like to ask people, if you've been to therapy before, if so, what was helpful?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be anything, not just what you maybe learned or took away, but like how the therapist responded to you, how they validated you, how they normalized what you were going through. Or maybe they just kind of brushed off your emotions and it was super crappy, right? Like, and so I think it's important when you get to a place when you're ready to go to see, your next therapist, just to be honest about your previous experience. I've had clients tell me, like, this previous person was just not a good fit, and here's why. And that's so beneficial for us to know,
Sure.
to learn about you and to appreciate your experiences and to help create something new, for you in this experience.
Or to ensure that they don't do the same thing. Like if they were unsupportive in a way or something they said came across incorrectly, to ensure that we are sensitive to that and try not to do that to them.
Yeah. If I may add to that, and I don't know if you ladies will agree or not, but if you don't, just tell me and I will correct myself. But I think that as we champion mental health, and I know that that's something that I champion, right? As we champion therapy and we champion going to therapists, I think we should also champion being a good friend to people. And so that means that when you're listening to people, if they seem to be going through something, I understand that you set boundaries and there are some things that you can't take on. But instead of saying, man, you need to go see a therapist, maybe you need to go to therapy, like being a good friend in those moments when they're sharing what they're going through, just saying just being a listening ear to them. Maybe you can't guide them and maybe you don't have the expertise, but you can be a good friend and you can listen to them and you don't have to be dismissive of the feelings that they're feeling. I think that we have to be careful, and I have to be careful as we champion mental health to not distance ourselves from people and say, I can't listen to your problems no more. Like, you need to go talk to somebody about that. But to rather say, man, I'm hearing you, I don't know the answers. I think that it may be beneficial for you to talk to somebody that could really be a professional help to you, but I want to listen to you.
It does not, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, if you have the capacity to listen, again, I understand setting boundaries and saying, hey, I can't keep taking stuff in, but I think that we have to be careful as we're championing therapy to also champion interpersonal relationships and just say, I'm here with you. Kind of going back to that Rachel was sharing earlier.
It does not require that much to validate someone's feelings, just to in that moment when they come to you, even if you don't have the capacity to really take on their load, so to speak, just sheer validation of what someone has brought to you and has entrusted you with does not require that much. It just to validate, man, I'm really sorry that you're experiencing that. Repeat what they've just said back to you, validate. Yeah, that is a difficult position to be in. I hate that you're experiencing that. I just validate, and then don't switch it back to something that you did. Like, just validate in that space. And then at that moment, like you said, if you know you cannot take that on and that is not a burden that you would like to help them carry, just go ahead and point them into the direction of a therapist or encourage them to seek out help, but validate. It does not require that much for us to just validate someone. And you never know what that validation could do. That just one instant could be something that talked them down off the ledge or kept them from going to the next step of self-harming. Or if they were thinking about harming themselves or someone else, just validating in that moment can really just take the edge off a little bit, because it normalizes, hey, I'm not crazy for feeling this. This is an intense feeling, and it's okay for me to feel that.
Yeah, that's so good. Because it takes me back, and we're getting ready to close out, y'all. So if you have any final questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. I'm going to say a little bit more and wait on you guys to put your questions in, and then I'm going to let the ladies share with you about some things that they have going on. Because in thinking about what it means to be a friend and what it means to validate, there's something that stuck with me through, as I'm in a grad program now. I'm not a counselor, just why I got them on, because you need the professional help. I'm here to just guide the conversation. But there is a term that's called Ubuntu. I don't know how to say it correctly. It's Ubuntu. It's a Zulu proverb. And it talks about a person is a person through other persons. It's just saying the need for interpersonal reaction, the need for us to be people, the need for us to validate, the need for us to hear, because you don't exist without other people. And so therapy is one really good way of doing that. But being a good friend is another really good way of doing that. Supporting people in your community is a really good way of doing that. And it's my hope that through Starting Point and through the conversations that we have throughout this season, we're able to just figure out what it means to be a person through other people, figure out what it means to be a support to people, find some starting points in our life for us to start healing. Because I tell this to my students all the time. I say, pain is going to come. It's not a question of whether pain is going to come. It's when is pain going to come. But your joy needs to be intentional. The things that you like about yourself, the things that you want to do, being self-aware enough to know, like, I want to go eat here. Not like, oh, whatever you want to do, but what do you like? What do you want? Knowing those things and being intentional about pursuing those things is your responsibility, because nobody's going to do that for you. You have to make that. So pain will come, but joy should be intentional. So just keeping that in your mind. I want the ladies to share with you, because they're both therapists that are doing virtual sessions if you feel more comfortable with that are doing in-person. Rachel is doing in-person sessions right now, and she's in Longview. Michelle is in Dallas, and they got some cool things that are coming. So I want them to share with you how you can get in contact with them, because they're amazing, as we've heard tonight. I 100% vouch for them. You're going to be seeing them on over and over again. We're building a list, y'all.
Go ahead, Rachel.
So like I said, I work out of the Laterno Counseling Center. I am seeing people virtually as well as in person, or it is socially distanced, but it is in person. And like I said, I work with teenagers and young adults, and really what I've really grown to love over the past couple of years is working with people who've been through trauma, and trauma can look different for everyone. And so really trying to help people heal. I do a therapy called Emdr, which helps desensitize and reprocess disturbing events. And it's really incredible. And so it's amazing to see people make really large leaps and bounds from something that's been so disturbing and traumatic, potentially in a mildly shorter time period. So if y'all are interested, or maybe know someone who would benefit from that, feel free to reach out to me. It's rachelolshine.com. I am kind of full at the moment, so I have like a little bit of a waiting list, but not too long. And yeah, look forward to helping and serving where I'm needed.
Somebody asked what age is young adults?
So I see 14 and up.
So, of course, I am in full-time private practice. I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth. I am only doing virtual sessions right now, but I'm in a group practice. We have several other therapists. So if interested, please go to www.lcscac.com. We have an array of skilled clinicians. I see ages 7 and up. I am certified in trauma-focused CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. I am full at the moment. However, we do have so many licensed and skilled clinicians. So if you need to get into therapy, do not let that stop you. One major thing, and you talked about this earlier, is that we have going on is our Superwoman Complex group. It meets on Mondays. And the purpose of this group is I wanted to create like a safe, confidential space for women to come together and support one another and really start to learn how to be vulnerable. And I know you said this earlier, like as a Black woman, like we have this cape and we have to take on the way of the world. But I think that's all women, like especially during this pandemic. We've had to be educators. We've had to be employers. We've had to be chefs. We've had to be so many different things and have so many different roles at one time. Like you're juggling and doing all the things. And to some people, like that's a badge of honor, but that tends to weigh on us. So the purpose of the Superwoman Complex is allowing us to take our cape off, learn what that means, learn coping skills that are sustainable over an extended amount of time, learning that you don't have to be a superwoman in order to be valuable, really redefining what it means to be strong.
So good.
And just really just being safe and building ourselves up. So if you're interested, please go to, again, www.lcscac.com and check it out. It's at the top of the page. It's a Superwoman Complex group. Of course, I can write our information in the chat box, but you can always call, you can email me, we can have a conversation and engage in that. It's a great group. We have curriculum. There will be a Facebook group for support. It's going to be like a closed group. So you start with the same women that you end with to really just build that community of support. So once the group ends, you still have that really close community of women that you can rely on and depend on and uphold one another.
That's so good. People can do that virtually?
Yes, it is virtual.
That's awesome.
So I put all of those links in the comments. You guys, don't be afraid to reach out. And like they said, maybe they're full at this time, but I'm sure they will be open to helping you find the right help that you need. I'm open to helping you find a therapist. I know some therapists that are in this area. If you're interested in therapy, pray and let's move. Let's start.
Let's
This is a
move.
starting point for us.
Yes.
And so thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you ladies so much for being on. I have really enjoyed our conversation today. And I will see you guys in a couple of weeks.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much for this opportunity.
Thank
Yes.
y'all.
Love that.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.